Thank you for being here. I'm going to be moderating our panel discussion today, and then I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves.
Well, hi everyone. I am Kim Silva. I'm the CEO at Community Food Share. Community Food Share is the Feeding America food bank that services Boulder and Broomfield counties. So there's over 200 of us nationwide. There's 5 here in Colorado, and we happen to have one of those. So we work with over 40 partners distributing food to their programs, as well as have our own on-site pantry, mobile pantries, and senior programs.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Nate Broeckert, and I am the executive director here at Coal Creek Meals on Wheels. Our mission is to remove barriers for folks who are in need of a nutritious meal and social connection. So we serve Lafayette, Louisville, Erie, Superior, tiny bit of Boulder, but don't tell them. We have been around since 1972 in some existence or another. We've been in this building since 2017. And, there's many iterations of Meals on Wheels. There are over 500 Meals on Wheels in the United States, but all of them are ran independently. And so we are lucky to fall under that umbrella, but get to operate in our own way and do things our own way. So excited for you all to be here.
Hi, I'm Schivonne Keller. I work for Clinica Family Health and Wellness for the Community Health Center that recently merged with Mental Health Partners. So we provide comprehensive health care, including specialty behavioral health. As the Community Health Center, we serve Boulder, Broomfield, Gilpin, and Adams counties. We have about 50,000 patients for primary care. And I'm a registered dietitian by training and a diabetes educator. I'm not currently in clinical care. I supervise our team of dietitians and integrated case managers who really get people connected to community-based resources like Meals on Wheels. And we started in Lafayette serving the migrant farmers. Alicia Sanchez would take people down to Denver Health and finally created a community movement that brought a community health center to Lafayette, a little house downtown Lafayette, and we have grown since then to be
One thing I want to mention about Clinica, because I love this, and I didn't know this. I hope I'm telling the story right. But who is the founder? Alicia
Sanchez
had lupus. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons Clinica was founded was because she was struggling to find care for herself as a patient of lupus. That story means a lot to me because I have lupus, and so that's I love that story. So I wanted to tell you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. I do have some planned questions, but please feel free to raise your hand, stop us at any time if you have questions that come up based on the conversation. And then we'll have some time at the end kind of for open discussion as well. But first, I wanted to ask all of you a couple questions. So September, which is Hunger Action Month, and it's about raising awareness and inspiring action. What does this month mean to you and your organization, both personally and professionally? Whoever wants to start on that. No one wants to.
I like order, but I'm happy to start. So I pursued a career in nutrition just because I knew early on that access to nutritious food was a fundamental part of health, right? So if you didn't have access to nutritious food, you're missing a essential building block for your health. So that's why I decided to train. And very early on in training, it's not just the food, but it's also the access and the systems that support the growing of the nutritious food, the healthy food in the community. And I started as a dietitian in WIC, which is Women, Infants, and Children, and it's a nutrition education program that provides access to food. And then I went to a community health center, and community health centers, we talked about the story of Alicia Sanchez, but community health centers were really born out of the civil rights movement. And, there was one in Boston and there was one in Mississippi. And when they founded the community health center, they also grew gardens because that community health center knew that the people they served, if they didn't have access to healthy food, it would be difficult to have a healthy community. And so I think, personally, it's very important to the work that I do. And professionally, the way this really shows up and why it's so important is we're not growing gardens anymore, but we are, screening for access to food, which sometimes is also referred to referred to as food insecurity. We might talk about it as hunger. But we're really doing that routinely with our patients and then getting them to the resources that they need. And helping them navigate the system, because sometimes the system can be really complex. So, I think it really reinforces why we're here and what we're doing and the relevance and the importance of it.
Great. Yeah, so I have been working for food banks for now 30 years. And one of the reasons why Hunger Action Month to me is so important is the fact that just educating the community on what hunger looks like here. It looks very different here than it does in third world countries. And so individuals have a stigma about, I don't want to use food services because there's somebody worse off than me. And the fact is that food services and food access is here for everyone who needs it. Everyone needs a helping hand now and then. And one of the greatest things is that when I started working in food banks, it was really about getting mass food out to people who needed it, regardless of the nutritional content. So it was how much could we purchase or how much could be donated for the lowest price so that we could get larger quantities out to individuals who need it. Now, in the 3 decades, things have really shifted to food as medicine. It is. Food is healthy, food is nutritious. So how do we provide people with nutritious food and foods they desire and need to thrive? So seeing that transformation has been really close to my heart. I believe access to food is a basic human right. Everyone in our country should have access to the food they need. We know the food is here. It's just how to get it from point A to point B, which is why Feeding America was formed, to really think about how can we procure in mass and distribute to areas that may not have grocery stores in their own communities. So Hunger Action Month to me is just always such a beautiful month to celebrate all the work communities are doing together to really feed communities and individuals the way they need to be fed.
I shouldn't have gone last.
Just have a $5.
That's it. I'm out. Well, I agree. No, here's what I will say. My career, this is my first time in the food insecurity space, and the majority of my career was spent in the youth and family space. I've been a nonprofit my whole career, but I actually started my career in a school district, and I ran community centers in Denver and in Jefferson County, and it was the most common problem we saw for families was inconsistent access to food and nutrition. And when we think about hierarchy of needs, there's a few things we know. What we know is that if your basic needs are not being met, food and shelter being the two most critical, you won't be able to secure any other basic need because those are the ones that have to be met. And we struggled in community centers to find consistent access for folks throughout our community. And that became an area that I was really interested in to learn more about how do we remove barriers, not only to access to food. I love what you said about food as medicine, and also remove barriers for folks having access to nutritional food that can act as the first line of defense to so many different diseases. There's so much data out there that talks to us about, we know that, and I don't have to tell you specifically, but we know that consistent access to healthy food, lessens your chance of having heart disease, having all sorts of other diseases. And if you have consistent access to healthy food, you're also less likely to suffer from depression and other mental health care barriers, right? So it really is the first line of defense when we think about how do we make wholesale change in community health and thereby community well-being. And so at Meals on Wheels, what we try to do here is we try to remove any barrier that may exist, specifically the ability to have to find transportation to your meal, right? Mobility is a huge challenge for the folks that we serve. When people think of Meals on Wheels, they think of older adults, right? And that is the majority of our clientele. About 70% of folks that we serve are over the age of 60. But that number is going down. It used to be, the average age of clients we serve right now is 71. 5 years ago, that number was 81. So it's going down, and it's going down quickly. So what that tells us is that folks are starting to struggle with food access quicker at an earlier age, and they are struggling with it for longer. right? In addition to that, we serve anyone. We don't have age restrictions. And our number of folks that we serve that are under the age of 20, that is actually our fastest growing age population right now. It was basically nobody 2 years ago. Now it's 5% of folks that we serve. And so access is getting harder and harder to come by, and also mobility is getting harder and harder to come by. And so we try to eliminate those two barriers of having consistent access to food and also having the ability to get to that.
Awesome, thank you. One more question for all of you, and you kind of all touched on this a little bit, but food insecurity is often described as a hidden crisis. How are you seeing it show up in Boulder County right now?
Well, I think we can see it all over Boulder County. I think one of the main drivers here is the high cost of living for not only Colorado, but Boulder County is one of the highest cost of living areas within our state. And so what you're seeing is a lot of people who fall off the benefits. So we have the benefits cliff. If you make $1 too much, you are off benefits. And when you are off benefits, that is going to highly decrease your ability to care for yourself and your family. So really taking a look at when we look around and people say, oh, the people who are coming to your food pantry, they don't look like they're in need. That is such a stigma that needs to be erased, because there are most of the individuals that we feed through our pantries and our partners feed are full-time working adults are in the household. They just do not make enough money to support all of the basic needs for themselves and their families. So, I always kind of describe when I'm talking to kids about, what hunger looks like here is different. When somebody says, I'm hungry, that is an actual feeling. You're feeling like you're hungry because you have not had anything to eat. And I say, how many people here have ever said they're hungry? And then every kid raises their hand at some point. And I always say, well, imagine that feeling to just go on for a long length of time because you don't have access to food you need. And try to go to school when you're not eating. Try to concentrate, try to go to gym class, try to play sports. None of that is possible. So really when I look at where it hits in Boulder County, it hits every age range. It hits every demographic and it hits all neighborhoods. And so it just shows up differently, but it is here. And between our programs and our partners, we're serving about 60,000 individuals a year with food needs within Boulder County.
Schivonne, would you like to talk about it from like a dietary nutrition perspective?
Oh, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And I think also just to piggyback off of that is it's often not a singular need. And then what we're seeing is the safety net in and of itself has become really constrained. So resources are declining and demand is simultaneously increasing. And so I think people feel a little bit more in crisis. What we see from a diet perspective is, part of food insecurity is not having access to the quality or the nutrient dense food that you would want. So you might be able to get the calories still, but they're not nutrient dense calories. And so then that makes it more difficult. So you might not even go to the food bank, right? Because you perceive that you have enough. But it's more difficult to manage an already existing chronic disease. So diabetes is kind of a prime example. So you might have more episodes of high blood sugar, more episodes of low blood sugar, and a prolonged state of that is going to lead to complications associated with diabetes. And then, the connection to your mental health, like you touched on. So it's not just the singular thing, it's this spectrum. And so if you're unable to, manage your chronic disease effectively, or you develop a chronic disease in response to that, then your mental health can be impacted. You might suffer from more stress as well. And so that we see that. And then you also see people making decisions. Do I buy food or do I buy my medicine? And so, and if you're living with a family, you might prioritize buying food for your family than your medicine. And so it just kind of can cascade into something that can kind of sometimes feel like it's getting out of control. And I think like that's what we see. And I think sometimes kind of going in and out of compliance I also think a lot of chronic diseases can be silent. So hypertension is a good example of that. People don't feel like their blood pressure is elevated, but it is. And so that can affect, your diet, or it can affect whether or not you're taking your meds. And so it can be kind of this spiral effect as far as nutrition goes.
Last I have 5 months old big. So I couldn't agree more with what's been said. And one thing that we see a lot here that I think is interesting, and I'll be the first to admit that when I started this role, I was fooled by it. A lot of times when you drive up to the homes of some of the folks that we serve, you're a little confused because you think, this is a beautiful house. This is much nicer than my house, right? But what's the second part of that coin is, or the flip side of that coin is, well, these are folks who have lived in these homes for in some terms 30 to 40 to 50 years, right? Their property taxes are insane compared to what they used to be. And these are folks whose sole form of income is Social Security, if that, right? And so they are having to make some really tough choices around, I'm on a fixed income and I have this amount of medicine that I need to buy in a month. I have this amount I need to save for my property tax bill that's gone up every year, sometimes doubled in a 1 to 2 year span. And so food, unfortunately, or at least nutritious food, becomes the last choice, right? We see folks who are eating, canned food for multiple days in a row, that's high sodium, that's heavily processed, because it's all they have access to once they've tried to meet some of those other critical needs. And I think in Boulder County, the challenge becomes, and I think that I can especially speak to us as fundraisers, we have to tell that story. And it's sometimes a hard story to tell because folks will say to you, I really don't understand what the need is in your community. And we have to really, it takes a little bit longer to get there. And certainly you can get there, but it takes a little bit longer because it's not right in front of you, especially as much as it can be in some other communities.
Zane, I'm gonna stay with you for a question.
Oh, thank God.
So Meals on Wheels saw meal delivery numbers skyrocket after the end of emergency SNAP benefits in 2023. So there was extra support given during the pandemic. Can you share how that shift impacted clients and the organization?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So the context there is, in March of 2023, extended SNAP benefits that had been extended in 2020 from COVID, those came to a screeching halt, basically. And many of the folks that we serve, either their SNAP benefits, which is food stamps as we know it, right, was, among other things, was either completely eliminated or was significantly reduced. When that happened, Coal Creek Meals on Wheels, I say now that's when we grew up as an organization. But it was a very abrupt grow up, right? It was kind of like getting thrown out of the house on your 18th birthday. We at that time were from a revenue standpoint, we're about a $400,000 organization. We were doing somewhere between 80 to 100 meals a day from a delivery standpoint. 2 months later, we were doing 210 meals a day. And today, our next budget revenue will be somewhere in the range of 1.2 million. So we've over doubled in that time. Now that's had two impacts, right? One is, it's had many impacts, but from an organizational standpoint, we didn't have the infrastructure to sustain that. And so we had to make some tough choices at that time to ensure that we were able to maintain that infrastructure. Now I'm proud to say, and I wasn't here, so I shouldn't be proud to say, but as an organization, we were able to accomplish a few things. We never had a wait list. Anybody who called us who needed a meal got a meal. We're very proud of that. And to this day, we still don't have a wait list. So we accomplished some good things, but the challenge is, we didn't have we still don't have the infrastructure really to produce that many meals. And so if you were to look at, if there were to be a kind of a 3D figure of Coal Creek Meals on Wheels right now, it would be held together by a lot of Band-Aids and by a lot of tape, right? Because we've had to come up with some really unique solutions to ensure that we're able to operate and to meet the need that we're now seeing. One example being, it used to be that all of my staff there's 8 of us, 9 of us, were housed in this building, right? Well, that's not the case anymore. We have offsite offices because there wasn't enough space here. We had to give up space for storage because we need more dry storage for food or things like that. So we had to grow up very quickly. And we also had to have a conversation around, and we're still having this conversation around, when do we think about a wait list? We're growing at an average of 3% every month. Now it has tapered off over the summer. I expect it will go back up. But before the summer, we were growing at an average of 3% a month. We're seeing more and more folks who are in need of our services who are younger, like I mentioned before. And we're also seeing more and more folks who are asking if they can have more meals. So it's not just a matter of neighbors that we're serving from a per person standpoint, but it's also from a needing meal standpoint, because for many of them, we're the only meal that they get throughout the day. So it's changed how we have to think about our infrastructure. It's changed how we have to think about our role in this community. When you're serving 80 meals a day, which we were in 2023, that's fantastic. And that's 80 folks who are getting fed who weren't getting fed before. But certainly, it's a little bit more scary to think about your impact in a good way when you're serving 300 meals a day, which is where we are now, because that's a lot of people who would really be struggling if we weren't around anymore. And so those are conversations that we're having now. Did I answer your question even?
Great, I love it. All right, so I'm going to come to you. So collaboration is key in this work. How do you see partnerships with organizations like Coal Creek Meals on Wheels, Clinica, all of the other organizations you collaborate with, strengthening the local hunger relief?
Well, I think collaborations and partnerships are paramount to any sort of community out there. There is not one organization that can change everything all at once. Everyone has their specialties of what they do and what they do well, their core competencies. And when you mix together the entire community's core competencies, you have a community of safety net folks who know everything from A to Z. So the key is that the more that you can find the people who have the competency in something you don't and partner together to try to find solutions, the better off the community's going to be. There is no way that this can be solved, whether it's any basic need by one organization alone. And it comes when we all come together and use our collective thought, our collective resources, and our collective passion to really help our community thrive.
Schivonne, what are some of the barriers that you see patients facing, whether it be yourself or in other areas of Clinica, when it comes to accessing and preparing healthy foods, and how do you and your team work with them to overcome those barriers?
So I think there's a lot of different reasons why someone might face the barriers. And so I think Kim touched on that with stigma, right? And so I think just fear in general of accessing resources in the community. You mentioned ability. I think that also makes a big difference in somebody's ability to access those resources. Unfortunately, sometimes the system can be fairly complex for people. When you look at, government policies or programs that support folks, SNAP or food stamps. And I think that's going to become increasingly complex with some policy changes that are coming. And then just the need to go through the eligibility process more often. So I think, you can look at systems that are complex, the ability, the knowledge, and then, I think having foods you mentioned that people like or are culturally relevant to people also makes a difference in what they can access. And so, what we're doing and what we do in patient care really is we screen, we ask the question. That's really kind of the first place you start. And you normalize that as part of this is part of your health, and we're asking this question. And, depending on the person's interest and support, helping them navigate that system and connecting them. And we are so fortunate to have such a comprehensive safety net, from community food share to Sister Carmen to Meals on Wheels. And so we do have different access points and points that will help with preparation, right? So there's one end of the spectrum. So maybe, the goal is not to educate on how you're going to prepare that meal, but get you the prepared meal. The other goal might be, we are going to, upskill you in how you can prepare a meal. And that's often very individually tailored. So that's the benefit of being in direct patient affairs. You can know their preferences, know their abilities, And you can work within those rather than, saying like, well, this is what you need to cook. We can kind of merge the two together in order to do that. And then, one other exciting thing kind of system wise that we're really doing is Boulder County's been working to really promote a community referral platform for social referrals called Find Help. And through that, they've really kind of invigorated this collaboration across the safety net to engage in this platform, because one barrier to finding resources is up-to-date resources, right? And so the intention is, engagement with this platform so that resources are up to date, they're comprehensive, and we can get people kind of, they can come to Clinica and ask for a nuanced resource and I can find it rather than kind of have to, weave through the system to find that.
Great. I did want to pause. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask the panel?
Yeah, I was kind of curious about to what extent you folks receive federal, state funding, and if so, how significant you see the changes that are, you mentioned red tape. It's just out there that deliberate turns an increase in red tape as a barrier to getting services, I guess. You see the work requirements, which on the outside sound, you need to work 20 hours a week or whatever. It's like, not sure that's fair.
You want to start?
Yeah, I mean, the changes from the administration are gonna have deep and really significant impacts to the basic needs safety net here. Just with our organization alone, our statewide food budget. So about 3 years ago, we had about $14 million for the state to get reimbursed on purchased food so that we could go out and purchase healthy food for our partners and ourselves. That has been cut to, that was 2 million this year for the entire state. And so our food, so about 80% of our food is donated. And then we purchase food to supplement what's not being donated. Last year, the fiscal year that we just finished, we spent $2.4 million on purchased food. Of that, about 1.3 million was reimbursed. That number is about 150,000 this year.
Wow.
So we had to cut our food purchase budget from 2.4 to 1.5 million this year. And that'll all just be from fundraising dollars that come through our doors. So it's significant. And some of the changes that you're talking about have happened in terms of the work requirements. Some are kind of on fiscal years that are going to happen in October and then the following October. We're waiting to see what happens in the midterm elections to see if any changes happen that could maybe put a little, a little pain to implement some of these things. But when it comes to Medicare, Medicaid, when it comes to SNAP, when it comes to all of these, it's going to have just push more people into a safety net system that is already stretched to the brink.
Yeah, so for us, we have a variety of funds also. We do receive federal funding that will be really influenced by October 1. So having a federal budget that's if they can vote on that. And so we'll see what happens. And then Medicaid is really the majority of how we get revenue. And so the more patients we have on Medicaid, the better financially we are. And so when we see changes to eligibility that decrease, people's ability to navigate that and kind of intentionally put up roadblocks. So we anticipate to see changes and really January 1, 2027 is when we would anticipate to see those changes, but there could be, depending on what happens in all of this, maybe things could change. And then other state funding, I think the state budget, they reconciled a $1.2 billion deficit, and then they had a special session to reconcile an unintended $1.2 billion deficit. And then we anticipate the deficits to persist, every year, probably some changes. And the impact is TBD.
Yeah. And especially as a Tabor state. We're the only state in the country that's 100% Tabor. There are some counties across the country. So it means that we cannot raise taxes for just to meet deficits. So everything has to go through a voting process. And in essence, when you're saying they're reconciling, what you're doing is just moving debt from one place to another, because there is no, I mean, you have some money in the reserves, but if you use all your money in 1 year, then it's just gonna get worse and worse. So trying to, and you'll see on the ballot quite often is a repeal of Tabor. It always fails. And why it fails is because everybody who files taxes gets $100 refund at some point during the year, or 200 based on the year. And people like that physical, I'm getting my money back. But what it really does is constrains the state from actually doing any additional services because of the fact that it has to go through a voting process versus just a executive motion to raise.
Yeah, the state can't keep
Yes.
surpluses in a given year.
Yes.
Right, where this can get complicated is because when you write something into legislation, you have to project the cost. And even if you have a tax that covers the cost, if it's in excess of the cost that was projected, you can't keep that
Yeah.
excess. And it's an acronym is the taxpayer bill of rights. That's what TABOR is for the gentleman who recently arrived from Arkansas. He was curious. It's a very Colorado, yeah, it impacts everything.
Yeah. I recently wrote an op-ed that was in the Denver Post, and basically the essence was nonprofits were never ever meant to be the sole provider of safety net programs in our country, right? We exist, or at least have historically existed to come along with the federal and state governments to provide these supports, right? We are currently being asked to be the sole provider of safety net programs to our communities. And so because of that, what's going to happen is we're going to be pushed to a breaking point that is not going to be sustainable. Now, I will say, and I've been saying to my staff and my board, that I do think on some level, philanthropy is going to try to bail us out. I think one thing that we're lucky to live in Boulder County because it is generally pretty philanthropic. It's a pretty fluid community for those who can't give, typically do. So there are some benefits there. However, there are a few unknowns there, right? One of them being the economy. If the economy tanks, right, which every economist who doesn't work for Donald Trump says it will, or could, yeah.
Strong.
Yeah. Then, people can want to be philanthropic all they want, but if their 401k has been destroyed, there's not going to be the reserve to pull out of to provide that support. And as far as federal funds for us, Coal Creek Meals on Wheels has historically chosen to not accept federal funding, which is a rarity for Meals on Wheels. There's some reasons we've done that. The biggest one being there is some red tape that becomes prevalent if you do. We would not be able to serve folks under 60 anymore, for example. So historically, that's why we have never done that. Right now, I'm thanking the folks before me who made that decision because it's a blessing. However, the challenge is that it makes us very reliant on our partner organizations like Community Food Share, who do have some skin in the game with federal funding. And so it's all a trickle down effect, right? If, we get about 30 to 40% of the product that we serve, we get from Kim and from Community Food Share. And so if there's if those belts have to be tightened, then that's going to have an impact on us. So that's one way that federal funding is going to impact us. And another way is, again, if folks are losing SNAP benefits and folks are losing Medicare or Medicaid, then they are going to have less resources available to spend on food. And so they're going to turn to us. And so it's going to be a demand problem, right? There is really only one difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit. And that is that for a nonprofit, every single neighbor I get, every client I get, I lose money, right? That's the difference. And so I say all the time, I'm like, listen, if we were a for-profit organization, this would be the best thing that could ever happen to us. Right? Because we're growing at 3% a month. But the problem is it's the opposite of that. And we no longer have our revenue is could not keep up with what that demand is going to be.
Every widget sold costs money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at it that way. As you were talking to about your cuts, which, boy, those are dramatic. Collaboration's wonderful. I'm sitting here thinking competition. Yeah, there's that scarce philanthropy dollar. Okay, it's there, but it's not limitless.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before too, Nate, about the trickle down of the demands that your need will put on that philanthropy community, and it shift because you've got a stark story. Ours is looking good compared to your story. Is the money going to the greater need, and then got to make our story more compelling, and you got to make your.
I think we're all very aware of that. We all need dollars to operate, but I also do think that we also look as a community to when are times when we could go in to ask for philanthropy together. So I just finished 2 asks out to the community with 4 other partners to say, okay, instead of us doing 4 different ones, let's just do one. Let's go in together, see what we can accomplish that way. So I do think there's going to be a lot more of kind of blended philanthropy that's going to happen to strengthen the network of what's happening where it can. And I also think that sharing resources is going to be bigger in the future of, hey, you have a lot of volunteers, well, you have a lot of space. If you have we've done pop-ups at Clinica because they have the space and the individuals who need access to the food. So where can we all make sure that we're just talking together? When you're trying to raise money, it is and you hate to say the word competitive business, but you're trying to say like everything is important and we're important, you're important, we're important. So how do we make sure every need is being met? And so some of the philanthropists, they have hard decisions to make. So then it really comes down to your own core of what matters to you and where you want to invest your generosity.
I know when Colorado Gives Day happens, and
Yes.
well, I know somebody who really, we give a lot when that happens,
Yes.
and then I'm always overwhelmed. I'm just
Yes.
overwhelmed because everybody's story seems so.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I always say, just focus on the good you're doing. And regardless of the stories are always going to be out there. It's almost like what we probably tell our team members at the end of the day, focus on the good you did today, not all of the things we didn't get to.
Yeah.
Because you'll just drive yourself crazy.
Yeah. I just can't agree more with the partnerships. We're in the process of also working on a pretty big partnership right now that's actually a corporate grant. And so couldn't agree more. I prior to this role, I worked at the Colorado Nonprofit Association and I was the director of programs and advocacy, and I'm not a big believer in nonprofit competition. And the reason for that is because now I think that what I'm about to say is only true if duplication of services is not happening. If duplication of services is happening, by that I mean if we're right down the street, we're trying to do the exact same thing, that could be a problem. But that doesn't happen a whole lot in this world, especially now, because if I go to Kim and I say, you're doing this much better than I am, why don't you keep doing it? That's typically the conversation and among execs in this world, right? That's number one. Number two, every client I get, I lose money, right? So I need community food share to exist because I couldn't take it on if they went under today. Right. An example of that is, a couple of years ago, the Meals on Wheels in Adams County went bust. It went away. Right. And there's some reasons why that happened. Well, because of that, we got calls. A lot of organizations got calls, but also because of that, the Volunteers of America took on Adams County from a Meals on Wheels standpoint. Well, they had a wait list of up to 1,000 people because they couldn't do it. Yeah. Right. So I want foundations to fund organizations like Community Food Share and Clinica and all of these other places. I want that. Now I want them to fund us too. But I couldn't agree more that it's all about working together. I mean, when I got this role, Kim was one of the first people I called because we have to have conversations. We have to know what's happening in the community, right? I mean, I've had great conversations with Simon at Clinica. We have to make sure that we're all, yes, staying in our lane, but also making dang sure that we're working together to meet these needs.
Is there any way that you can perceive helping to minimize the food waste in the community and also from restaurants and?
Yeah.
You wanna start?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different organizations, including us, working on how to minimize food waste. And I will just let you know from the we'll distribute about 13.3 million pounds of food. Of that, less than 1% goes into the garbage. Because of the fact that when it becomes non-consumable for humans, we do work with pig farmers, with wolf sanctuaries, to actually get that food, so it stays in the system. But you have organizations that go around and pick up leftover foods from restaurants before it goes out. You have zero waste campaigns through King Supers, things of that nature, trying to get the food through. So is there still a lot of waste in our world? Yes. It's still cheaper to cull under crops that are not purchased than it is to have people get that food and put it into the system. And we've been working a lot, trying to work with farmers to figure out what is that solution. If we were to pay for the labor to get that out, could we get it out and back into the system? But I do think food waste legislation is going to get tighter and tighter. It's already in California, they already have food waste legislation, where companies, organizations are penalized for the amount of waste they have, and that is gonna come to, normally it goes to California and then it'll come to Colorado.
Like stop in Oregon first.
Yeah, stops in Oregon.
Stops in Oregon.
And
Yeah.
it comes here, so we're trying to figure out what does that look like in terms of composting and having things in place to kind of help mitigate. But once again, it's the dollars you need to get the food before the farmers pull it under.
One thing I'll say, and Luna's kind of working on that too. We've thought a lot about how do we partner with farms and how do we have some of those conversations. For us, there's also this element of, we have a container problem, right? So all of our food is delivered in these hideous black plastic containers, right? Which, by the way, speaking of California, would be illegal in California. You literally could not do that. Yeah. So it's in the budget I'm building for next year to move towards compostable containers to the tune of almost doubling our container cost, right? And so those are things that, and it's a bummer of a year to put something in a budget that costs double what it cost the year before, right? And so we have to keep having those conversations. And then to go back to food waste, we have a lot of different things in place to ensure that if a meal is left, we somehow get it back, or we're somehow able to, to really think critically about how are we ensuring that meals that we're providing folks are actually being taken and being, right? We made a real tough decision recently to sunset our frozen meal program. So it used to be, well, it still is today, but next week's the last week, where we would deliver frozen meals for the weekends. Well, it became abundantly clear to us that those were not being eaten at a very high rate, right? And so that was food waste. And so we're eliminating those for that reason. So there's a lot of conversations around it that do happen. And I think we're going to have to keep having those conversations.
Any other questions, comments? All right, well, I kind of a little ending question for everyone. And then again, if anyone has any questions, that's fine. What role can everyday community members, like those individuals here, play during Hunger Action Month and beyond to help fight hunger and food insecurity locally?
I think, obviously, being here, I think that's great. You have the opportunity to go and talk to your peers and people who you can influence with your passion. And I think anytime you can donate time or money or whatever you can donate is always helpful for the system. And then I think, your story and, you think back to like Alicia Sanchez, Eleanor Montour, these individual things that people do, you never know where that will take you. And that's very powerful. And then I think continue to talk about it because of the stigma, right? And so I think those are a few things off the top.
I'm not going last.
Wait, that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think a couple things, right? First of all, I think I agree wholeheartedly that being here is a great step, because I think that we have to be involved in having conversations about what is happening in our community, because food insecurity is happening in our community, and let's talk about it. Let's be aware of it. Let's make people feel comfortable when they can to share that they're struggling, so that we can be advocates for them. I'm a big believer in that how we change the world is one community at a time, right? And so I think that when, speak up for your neighbor, help your neighbor when they need help, tell them about community food share, tell them about Meals on Wheels, tell them about Clinica, tell them about the resources that are available to them. I think that's really important. I also think it's really important to understand how it's being impacted, and or what the numbers are, right? What is the impact in your community? Learn the data. I'm sure that you could go to any of our websites and we have data readily available to you around what our service numbers look like, around what we know about our community. My team hates it because I say all the time, well, what's the data on that, right? I'm a believer, though, that those are the numbers that tell the story, right? And so know those numbers, know what's happening in your community, because then you can be an advocate, right? And then also, if you're on our website looking at those numbers, there's a button that says donate on the top corner. And so what you do is you just click there and you whip out your credit card, because credit cards are a great way to help with Hunger Action Month, to every organization you see here today.
Beautifully said.
Thank you. That's why I'm here before you. You're a more seasoned fundraiser than I am.
That is all true. Anytime you can be ambassadors for the community and speak the stories of what you hear, what you've seen, what you've learned, that goes farther than anything else. But yes, learning about the organizations within your community, getting out there, taking tours, looking at your grandchildren and your children, and how can you get them involved? I always like to say that in this kind of atmosphere and of fear and negativity, we have a shirt, and I love to wear it. I wear it all the time, that says food is love, because it is. When you have compassion for people, food is more than just calories. Food is stories. It's childhood. It is how people are brought together to have conversations. And so just, practicing showing that love to others is how you could really help our community get stronger.
Any last minute questions, comments? Awesome. Well, I want to do a quick shameless plug for us, and Kim, Schivonne, if you have anything to add. We do have a couple of things going on this month. We have our apparel sales for Coal Creek Meals on Wheels going on through October 1st. So there's a QR code over on the table. And then we also have our Roll Stroll event. So today, the 23rd, and what's left? 29th. That's all on our website. So all of that is just kind of coming together, raising awareness, a little bit of fundraising with our apparel sales. So if you're interested in any of that, chat with myself or Luna. We're happy to give you some information there. Kim or Schivonne, anything to add that your organizations have going on coming up?
Oh, no upcoming events.
I'm sure they're on our website if we do, but I just want to say thank you for including us in this conversation, because being included is one of the ways when we work together, and just so appreciative to be here.
So let's give our panelists a round. And no pressure to run off. Feel free to hang out, chat amongst yourselves, ask the panelists any questions, but that's it. We'll let you get